nondescript working class neighborhood. I was there for 3 months. It was far from the tourist area of Mexico City, of DF. And we would wake up in the morning and we would walk around, and the people, the other teenagers, the 20-someths, they'd be like, what are these weirdos doing here in our community? What are these white guys doing? They'd make friends with us. They were very intrigued. And so I quickly learned Spanish, Mexico City style, with a heavy dose of teenage slang. And of course, like any language, there are accents and dialects. Spanish in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic is faster and softer compared to the hard, definitive words of Mexico City, Mexican Spanish. And I was in Spain in 1996, and they didn't seem to understand anything I was saying. You know, I'd, ¿Cómo estás? And they'd be like, no, ¿cómo estás? You know, you got to do the lisp, right? So a few months ago, groups of people began showing up at Respond Now with Spanish accents that were not the Mexican accents that we were used to from the community of Chicago Heights. Now, for context, Respond Now has been in operation since 1969. I've been there since 2006. We have a food pantry, we help with rent and utility assistance, and we help with the homeless. And so people were showing up, and lo and behold, these were asylum seekers from Venezuela and Colombia. You know, we heard about it on the news, and these folks had reached Chicago Heights. It was amazing. I mean, here were these people who had traversed jungles and the sea and borders, searching for safety and opportunity. And they ended up at 1439 Emerald Avenue in Chicago Heights, Illinois. I mean, it was really extraordinary, but not that unique. I mean, you know, for time immemorial, humankind has traveled the world searching for new opportunities. My grandmother, for example. I mean, when we are in need, we migrate to where life is hopefully better, and this will continue, and it will continue always. We travel over land bridges, and we scale mountains, and we take to the seas, and we cross borders that are geographical, borders that are based on empire, borders that are imaginary, borders that are human-made. We are well conditioned to accept borders, often to tragic consequences. I mean, over the last 3 months, there have been numerous incidents where young people were killed after passing over somebody's border of their private property. These were Black boys looking for their siblings and white girls trying to find the party that they were invited to. I mean, even in Hammond, Indiana, where my wife and I live, people complain about the people from Illinois coming to our town with their bad driving habits and their general proclivity to violence. I mean, the city of Hammond has built one barricade after another along the state line to prevent the bad guys from Illinois cruising our side streets. And, you know, it's absolutely correct for families in Woodlawn on the south side, where migrant shelter is being built or is being offered. It's absolutely correct for the people of Woodlawn to question why resources, albeit they're limited, but resources are being poured into shelters for asylum-seeking families when South Side and South Suburban and West Side communities have struggled for years with homelessness, lack of mental health resources, and general poverty. They're not out of line to ask those questions. This sense of invasion dominates the public discourse, leading us to accept the notion that we live in a zero-sum game of resources, which is only true, this zero-sum game, because we live in a system that demands profit over the needs of people. But wisdom from the world's religions inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. I mean, Buddhists acknowledge the poisonous nature of greed. Islam asserts that the principle of justice must be at the core of economic activities. The Tao Te Ching states that if people chase after money and security, Their hearts will never unclench. And our Jewish and Christian roots teach that poverty is an unjustifiable burden and that we should love our neighbors as ourselves. Our own Universalist tradition counsels that we should manifest our mutual salvation on the earth by our individual and collective efforts in service of sufficient abundance for all. Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 13, also known as the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for the same way they persecuted the prophets who were born before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So we can interpret the Sermon on the Mount as an urging that good things come to those of us who wait, for those of us who remain humble and meek, merciful and hungry. There's the song, long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right, but when asked about something to eat, they will tell us in voices so sweet, you will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live and pray, you'll eat pie in the sky when you die. Thank you, Joe Hill. But the Universalist tradition counsels that we should manifest our mutual salvation on earth by our individual and collective efforts in service of sufficient abundance for all. Thus, the first beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That requires us to dissolve ourselves of ego and selfishness, to be poor in spirit, so that we may accept the blessing of God. UU tradition asks us to dissolve ourselves of ego and selfishness so that we may be in the service of community, especially when community includes those who have left their home countries, crossed multiple borders, and then forced onto buses by those with racist political egos, dropped off in Chicago to find themselves sheltering on the floor of the 22nd Police District. We are surrounded by a poverty of community and goodwill. The struggle between those opposing forces begin with us. I mean, we hide our head in the sands of bourgeois culture, breads and circuses, drugs and alcohol, TikTok, what? Baseball, television, binging. The latest trend is bed rotting, which doesn't sound regenerative, and yet bed rotting has become one of the most popular forms of recouping, according to TikTok anyway. Rotting away in bed seems to be one of Generation Z's preferred methods for self-care, lying in bed for long periods of time. It doesn't matter what you do while you're in bed or while you're there, as long as you're cuddled up in bed beyond bedtime. And fans claim that bed rotting can be a great way to reclaim both physical and mental health, and that it has to be intentional and come with no guilt to really count and be regenerative. That's what my kids have been doing. I like it. I like laying in bed. We are also, more importantly, surrounded by an abundance of community and goodwill who put their faith into action, living our 7 principles, principles which, by the way, are in danger of being rescinded by the UUA, which is another story for another time. But our 6th principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, asks us to go down to the 22nd district to bring community and love and political righteousness to those migrants who are sleeping on the floor. So this is the audience participation. Let's take a moment to hear about some of those efforts that have been taken on by the good people of Beverly. For blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So I don't live in Beverly. I'd like to hear some of the, yeah, I know that guy.
Hi, Carl. Yeah, there have been a lot of people in this community who, and in Beverly at large, and the Beverly Unitarian community, who have been giving assistance and help to the asylum seekers in the 22nd. And at one point, there were upwards 30, 40 people there. At this point, there are only 2, but there may be more coming on. And there's other issues besides food. There's a question of medicine and getting people in touch with various resources. So no, I'm not going to call out any names, but you know who you are, and I'm going to. So Pam and Doug and Kathy, Lenore, I don't know, Tony and Anna. Anna done a lot and still doing a lot. Thank you. So we have to be a little careful here, you know, because you get a sore arm patting yourself on the back, but we need to be, and actually full that we have an opportunity to do some good.
Yeah.
People in the community have been making breakfast, lunch, and dinner for, was 24 adults and 10 children every single day. And I was overwhelmed thinking about cooking for that many people. And I think it was Jean and Mary said, well, let's go upstairs and here and cook together. And then they were taken away. Before that, we were gonna organize to cook. I was like, what else can I do for these people? And I thought, they need showers. So Jean and Mary Crowley and Linda Peterson and I had this caravan to Ridge Park with the women and the children. The men were off somewhere working illegally. And we got there and the locker room was locked. And I was like, oh no, they were, you know, so ready for these showers. Can you imagine how they've been living and no showers? And so Mary went and talked to the management at the park, and I was not confident. And this young woman came out and she had called her supervisor, you can come here anytime. And I was so moved by that. Just a simple thing. When they came out of those showers, which took a long time because those kids were, Mary, weren't they having a ball? And everybody came out shiny and squeaky clean. And this is I think I will share it. One of the women, she was so happy, but she did this and showed me her underwear. She only had one pair of underwear. So, yeah.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. My struggle, the struggle of many of us, is finding that sweet spot between indulgence and self-care and being part of the abundance of community and goodwill. That sweet spot is where one strengthens the other, bringing the opposing forces together to create a new paradigm. Che Guevara wrote, "At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. We must idealize this love of the people, of the most sacred causes, and make it one and indivisible. We must strive every day so that this love of living humanity is transformed into actual deeds, into acts that serve as examples, as a moving force. And yet, we live in a system that in many ways rejects the love of living humanity. We are faced and witness toxicity and oppression every day. Our political leaders pander to hatred, conspiracy, and hysteria, but we must not only object and reject, but make it our work to oppose these forces." And so earlier last year, Respond Now staff engaged in a broad discussion on the values that we hold important relative to the work that we do. The fact of the matter is that social service professionals are prone to burnout. And while we ourselves are not necessarily faced with the stress of being homeless or in desperate poverty, we are surrounded every day by those who are, and we are tasked with finding solutions for them, and it takes its toll. The extent to which someone can lose sight of the values that should guide our work, you can become cynical. And thus, during our seminar, we recommitted ourselves to acknowledging the systemic inequities inherent in society and understanding that everyone comes from a different background. Through a trauma-informed, compassionate lens, using a mindful approach, we offer services to support the health and wellness of our community, meeting clients where they are at. We promised to acknowledge and promote diversity and work to ensure that we are accessible and that we conduct ourselves with approachability and acceptance. We hold ourselves accountable to being inclusive to everyone in all aspects of the organization. And we held this seminar at the Park Forest Unitarian Church, and so in a nod to the influences of that space and in a nod to my own membership in the Unitarian Church, we confirmed that Respond Now believes in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and that we adhere to a person-first approach and remain committed to learning, believing each individual is the expert of their needs. Our wish is to see all people thrive. And so layer upon layer in our work, in our lives, in our church, in our communities, we build our understanding of the just, equitable, peaceful, and inclusive world to which we aspire. From one we borrow to the next we give. This is the acknowledgement of Unitarian Universalism, that we experience mystery, that we promote the words and deeds of prophetic people, and that we embrace the wisdom of the world's religions, and that we love our neighbors as ourselves, that we are taught by Jewish and Christian scripture, and that we embrace humanist teachings, honoring our earth-centered traditions. Our principles, they guide us to a world without poverty. Our principles guide us to live our faith in action. So may our actions move us toward the beloved community that will make the bare necessities of health, hunger, and housing a given, that which is our birthright, health, hunger, and housing, that which is not shackled to false questions of resources. Our capacity to do this is not limited by that which is material, but by our willingness to demand better. Let's make it a non-negotiable, and let us create the conditions in which we will pass this test with flying colors for the millennia to come. Thank you.
Please rise as you're able in body or spirit and sing together hymn number 159.